participants will be discussing the use of habit reversal to decrease filled pauses in public speaking. Here we have the agenda. We're going to be going over introduction, participants, purpose, background, materials, behavioral definition, data collection method, public speaking questionnaire results, how do we do it from baseline to post-intervention, IOA and treatment fidelity, results, and social validity. To get us started, briefly, what is a filled pause? A filled pause is merely the utterance of things like and throughout speaking, as well as tongue clicking and the misuse of the word like. You might be thinking, what about filled pauses is considered a habit, making habit reversal an effective intervention in decreasing the behavior? The original study to our replication written by Mancuso and Miltenberg in 2015 compared stuttering to filled pauses due to the repetitive nature and the disruptive impact that they both have on speaking. Past studies will be discussed in more detail by Ashley momentarily. They indicate that there has been success using habit reversals to decrease a multitude of other behaviors, including stuttering. The results of the original study suggest that the use of habit reversal does decrease the use of filled pauses in public speaking. And each of the 6 participants in the original study engaged in high rates of habit within the baseline phase, yet had an immediate change of high magnitude directly following the implementation of intervention, where within post-intervention, only one of the 6 participants required a booster session for the maintenance of the decreased habit. Tiffany will further discuss the dynamics of the intervention from start to finish later in the presentation. So without further ado, let's get to know the participants of our replication and see what habit reversal did for the use of filled pauses in their public speaking. Here you have it. We consist of being 5 females, age range 24 to 28, all enrolled in graduate studies at Ball State University for ABA, living throughout various areas of Indiana and Illinois with no existing diagnosis or history of the use of habit reversal intervention. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I'm Leah, and my picture can be found on the far left here. Moving over to the right, you're able to see Chelsea. Moving once more over is Alexa, although she does go by Lexi. Now, once again, moving to picture to the right is Ashley, and on the furthest right, you're able to see Tiffany.
The purpose of this study was to decrease filled pauses while publicly speaking using habit reversal methods. A fun little quote by Mark Twain says, "It usually takes me up to 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech." We targeted speech utterances as our behavior for reduction because of its social significance. Based on previous research by Ramos Salazar, it was found that vocalized pauses or speech utterances have a negative effect on the individuals engaging in the behavior, as they are perceived by others to be more anxious, uncomfortable, less trustworthy, and less credible on the subject they're speaking on, in a similar way to stuttering. Hausman and Siltanen backed up this statement by concluding that vocalized pauses result in the speaker being perceived as less powerful and skilled in the workplace. On the other hand, people who do not engage in these behaviors while speaking are perceived to be more intelligent, sincere, and trustworthy, leading to better employer satisfaction. And finally, when others have a negative perception on an individual, it often leads to that individual having a negative perception of themselves, increasing anxiety and even depression. Next, we're going to talk about the research on the method we use to reduce speech utterances. According to Heineke et al., habit reversal training has been an effective method used in the past to reduce automatic behaviors that are beyond the individual's awareness. The habit reversal training method consisted of awareness training, response detection, competing response training, and social support. Other researchers have found that habit reversal training effectively reduced a number of repetitive behaviors, such as nail biting, injury of the skin, nose picking, chewing on lips and mouth, face touching, rubbing eyes, hair pulling, tics, and stuttering. Because habit reversal training has effectively decreased stuttering and the topography is similar between stuttering and speech utterances, habit reversal training was chosen to decrease instances of speech utterances.
The materials we used for this experiment were 25 conversation topics that we collectively came up with as a group, a computer with recording abilities, the Zoom application for presentations, Google Docs to collectively work on the assignments, a public speaking questionnaire and social validity scale to evaluate our personal comfort levels in public speaking, and lastly, we use a data collection spreadsheet. For our behavior definitions, we broke down filled pauses into 3 smaller definitions. For filler language, the speaker uttering a syllable such as ah, or, as well as tongue clicking and the misuse of the word like. Tongue clicking is defined as an audible tisk or clicking sound that is made when the speaker puts their tongue at the roof of their mouth, applying pressure and releasing their tongue. For the misuse of the word like is when the speaker uses like when not used to compare two things or express their enjoyment towards something. For our data collection method, we use video recording through Zoom taken during each session and completed in 3 minutes. We also use the GymBoss app to keep consistent intervals with a buzzer going off every 15 seconds. And lastly, we used frequency per interval, and we collected data during all phases of the study. After recorded, the participants rewatched their speech and collected data of the occurrences for their 3-minute speech, and the frequency was then converted to rate per minute. For the personal report of public speaking anxiety, it was developed to measure communication, apprehension, and focused on public speaking anxiety directly. The questionnaire had 30 questions. Each participant read through it and rated them on a scale of 1 to 5 on how true they were to themselves. Leah scored 127, Chelsea scored 115, I scored 115, Ashley scored 119, and Tiffany scored 146. All 4 participants were in the moderate range and Tiffany was in the high range. The mean of our group was 115, the median was 119, and our mode for the group was 124.4.
So how we did it. For baseline measures, participants were given 2 topics to choose from the list of 25 topics put together by all participants. After choosing a topic, each participant was given 10 minutes to prepare their 3-minute speech with no guidelines as to what to say. A spokesperson was assigned to each participant in order to prompt the speaker to keep going if they stopped for 15 seconds or if before their 3 minutes elapsed, and to give the 1-minute warning to signal the end of the speech. No feedback was given for baseline speeches. After baseline came awareness training. For this step in the process, the target behaviors were discussed and each participant gave another speech on the same topic as their baseline speech. During this speech, response detection was used. For this, each participant would raise their right hand if she engaged in the target behavior and her left hand if she was aware she was about to engage in the target behavior. The other 4 group participants also raised their hands whenever the speaker would engage in the target behavior to aid them in awareness. Awareness training ended when participants reached 100% in one speech or 85% awareness in two consecutive speeches. After that came competing response training. For this, before their speeches, participants modeled and were given descriptions of the competing responses for filler words such as or which was a 3-second pause, for tongue clicking, which was placing their tongue on the backside of their bottom teeth, and for using the word like inappropriately, it was restarting their sentence and not using the word like again. 2 new topics were randomly presented to the participant for this stage in the study, and they were able to choose one to give another 3-minute speech on. Before giving the speech, the participants were reminded to use the competing responses for the target behaviors, and if they did not use it within 2 seconds, their spokesperson would prompt them to. This phase of the study ended when each participant reduced their target behaviors by at least 80% of their baseline mean. After that was post-intervention. This occurred no more than 3 days after each participant's last speech, which is after they reached their mastery criterion. Then they gave another speech, and if they did not reduce their baseline mean rate of use of filler words by at least 75%, they were provided booster sessions. Booster sessions consisted of what was done in baseline, except the target participants did not have to identify the behaviors in a 3-minute video clip. The 2 to 5 weeks follow-up sessions were not ran due to time restraints in this semester. Now we will move on to IOA and treatment fidelity. So here we have an APA style table that summarizes all the group's IOA for baseline and for intervention. To collect data for IOA, our group used an interval by interval data collection system for both baseline and intervention. The participant and the observer collected data simultaneously by watching pre-recorded videos of the speeches. IOA was taken for at least 20% of each of the participants' baseline and intervention data. IOA percentages ranged from 83% to 100% for all participants in this study, making for acceptable data collection by all 5 participants. If 80% agreement was not reached between observer and participant, then the operational definition of the target behavior would have been discussed and the data would have been retaken until 80% was agreed upon. For our fidelity summary, in order to maintain treatment fidelity, all participants were made sure to be knowledgeable on the operational definitions of the target behaviors as well as the procedural method used. Each participant filled out a checklist in the form of a table that was generated to make sure there was a complete and consistent understanding by each participant. The fidelity checklist consisted of breaking down all phases of the study separately into steps of the actions that needed to be taken in order to implement the study accurately. Each participant checked whether each step was followed or not followed. When reviewing completed checklists, it showed that each participant had 100% treatment fidelity for each phase of the study.
I will now be talking about the results of our replication. The results showed that habit reversal greatly reduced field pauses and public speaking for 4 out of 5 of our participants. One participant required no further intervention, and this will be explained in greater detail later in the presentation. Results for post-intervention showed that all participants maintained 75% of their baseline mean. Previously mentioned, awareness training was completed after the stabilization of baseline and prior to competing response training. Participants were required to detect the awareness for 100% of one speech or 85% of 2 consecutive speeches. The results for awareness training shown in the table to the left are 3 out of 4 of the participants completed awareness training within the first 2 speeches. Following awareness training was competing response intervention. Included in this presentation are the tables and graphs depicting baseline, intervention, and post-intervention data for 4 out of 5 of the participants. One participant did not leave baseline, as previously mentioned. We can see here that Chelsea's baseline has a high variability at a high level. With the implementation of competing response training, Chelsea's data displays stabilization and a steady descending trend. There is a clear functional relationship across all phases. Next, we can look at Tiffany's baseline data showing a low variability at a low level. Once competing response was implemented, Tiffany's data depicts a steady descending trend. This shows a functional relationship across all the phases. When we look at Lexi's data, we see baseline at a low variability and a higher level. Immediately after competing response is implemented, there is an instant change in high magnitude, showing a functional relationship between the decrease in behavior and the intervention. Lastly, we can look at Ashley's data.